Hi everyone, welcome to Centrifuge. I should probably introduce myself. I'm Isaac. This is my first time using my phone to shoot this kind of video, so I hope you're looking at me right now. I'm Isaac. I'm also known as Kind Fortress. You can find me on the internet at kindfortress.com or on Twitter as @kindfortress. And this is my entry. This is Centrifuge, and it's my entry for the 7-day design challenge hosted by Collapse Cards. So let's take a look. All right, I apologize for the panning. Not a great camera operator, but let's do this. Okay, what's this game all about? Well, Centrifuge is a game in which two scientists are competing, trying to refine some kind of rare element. I don't know, the theme's a little tacked on, but work with me. In order to win this game, you're going to be trying to collect these gems. And you see we've got 4 blue ones, 2 purple ones, and 1 green one. And the blue ones will be the least valuable. They'll be 1 point. The purple ones will be 2 points, and the green one will be 3 points. The player who collects the highest value, has the most points at the end of the game, is going to win. I also want to walk you through some of the other components. The lighting here can be a little bad, so I just want to show you we've also got 4 each of these yellow, orange, and brown resources, and each player starts with 4 green ones. So player 2 over there, and these are just in the stock. These are in the general available pool. Okay, I also want to show you, this is the centrifuge right here, this battery that we see here of a die, a card, a die, a card, and a die. And the important thing here is that I just want to push those two because those are actually belong to each player, but let me get to that in a moment. We've also got over here a set of 7 cards, and these will come into play, and we'll be able to replace them on the cards that are currently on the standees with some of these. And everything in this game is really about its orientation. So what that means is that these blue gems are closer to player 1, and those are closer to player 2, and that will matter. The same thing is true of these cards. The ones that are closer to you are more available to you. Let's talk a little bit more about what that means. So what do you do? What do you actually do in this game? Well, what you're trying to do is run your centrifuge, which is to say run this entire process. And what that means is that on each card, you'll notice there's some kind of transformation. So this says a green and a yellow cube become a brown cube. There's also some stuff under the line, and that's because these cards can in fact be tipped so that now the other equation is active, the one that's written in the landscape style. So you've got a green and an orange cube become a yellow cube. So if you had a green and a yellow cube, you could process them and yield a brown cube, and then you'd keep going. The die would provide you an additional resource based on what was showing. So if, for example, it was on its yellow face, if you were able to run through this first process with a green and a yellow cube and get a brown cube out of it, you'd now add a yellow cube, and now here you'd have a yellow and brown cube, and that leads the purple diamond. Purple diamond is the generic icon for you've made a gem. You've actually succeeded in running your centrifuge, and you've created this rare element, and so you'd be able to claim the gem that was closest to you. Okay? That final cube is not relevant to this player on this side, to player 1. It belongs to player 2, and because you always have to process from left to right, that's player 2's resource cube. Okay, so I've just moved them a little bit just to show which player can manipulate which. What do you do on your turn? So on your turn, you can take a couple of actions. You may take either 2 manipulation actions, or 1 manipulation action and 1 processing action. So here are the manipulation actions. Here's what you may do. You may swap the order of any 2 gems. So you might do this and get yourself closer to being able to claim the purple gem when you successfully process. Similarly, let's say that your opponent had shuffled that green gem all the way close to him, and that green gem is worth 3 points. You might spend an action doing that, right, pushing it further. You could then spend a second action as well to push it even further away. Okay, let's just reset that so everything is as it started. All right, and so that's manipulating the line of gems. Another action you could take, a manipulation action, is you can turn over your die. And this die belongs only to the player on this side. Only that player can manipulate it. And it has really 4 sides. There's 2 blank sides in the game. It starts on a blank side, but really you can maneuver it so that it shows any resource, yellow, green, orange, or brown. And that will actually contribute a cube to you when you run the processing action. So we'll get to that in a moment. I'm going to put it on yellow for right now. Okay. A third thing that you can do is you can manipulate the card row, and this works exactly the same as the gem row. You can take any 2 cards and swap them around. And I just want to take a closer look at the cards because we're about to get into it with the cards. Okay, so there's a couple of things you should notice. I'm just going to take these 2 and change their orientation a little easier for us to see a couple of things. First thing is every card has a portrait row, and in the portrait row it shows you what manipulation or what processing equation is going to happen when this card is in portrait orientation. So this one says a green cube and a yellow cube become a brown cube. This one says a yellow cube and a brown cube become a gem. And it also has its portrait orientation. Now the portrait orientation and the landscape orientation. The portrait and landscape orientations are never the same. They're always different on each card. When the card is in its landscape orientation, it will process a green and a brown becomes a yellow. This one is an orange and a brown become a gem. Now, another thing to notice is that the cards in the bottom left either have a 1 or a 2. You see that? A 1 or a 2. And that's because that is the order in which they must be arranged on the centrifuge display. So you'll see 2 cards in the centrifuge right now. That one is the 1, and that one over there is the 2. Terrific. Now that's really, really important because all 1s will yield some resource cube, and all 2s will yield a gem. And each card is double-sided, so if it's a 1 on one side, guess what? It's a 2 on the other. And that's why what appears to be a 2 to player 1, right, in this orientation, on the other side is a 1 for player 2, because player 1, this may be confusing, but it shouldn't be too terrible, 1 is always going from left to right, and 2, from his perspective, is always moving from left to right as well. So, okay, we can manipulate the cards, and I just want to be clear about setup. We're laying down these 7 cards, and the setup is entirely random as to which cards are in the centrifuge and which cards are in the available row. But what's really important is that you lay the cards out so that you go 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2 until the end, so that the card that's in the available slot, the slot facing each player, is always going to be, at the beginning of the game, a 2. Okay, so how do you manipulate the card row? You can simply maneuver things like that. Alternatively, you may flip over. Probably should have done that with a card that was on camera. You may flip over any card. Okay, and then you can see what's on that other side. So those are some manipulation actions that you can take with the cards. I'm going to get to processing in just a moment, but there's one more thing that you can do in lieu of taking 2 manipulation actions or 1 manipulation and a process, and that's a retooling action. And retooling means you take the card closest to you in the card row and you replace your card with it. And when I say your card, I mean the card with the number 1 on it. So for player 1, that's this card, and for player 2, that's that card. You may not change the other card, you may only change your card. And when you take a card, and I've taken this one, and this one you see has a number 2, but I can't place the number 2 side facing me. I have to place the number 1 side facing me. So I may not even know exactly what I'm getting, because I may know what I'm giving my opponent. But when you take that replacement action, you'll actually pull the existing card out of its holder, discard it, right? We're just going to take that away and put the new card in, and you may put the new card in any orientation, and once you have made the decision to acquire the card, even though only its two side is facing me. At this point, I'm allowed to look at it and decide exactly in which orientation I would like to lay it. Okay, I hope that's all clear. Now we get to the processing stage. So in the processing phase, what you're going to do is you're going to follow the equation, and you're going to use your stock, right? You start with a few resources, right? And so when you process, you say, all right, well, I need a green and a yellow into brown. I have a yellow from my starting cube. This acts as a yellow. You don't have to pull one from the stock to show it. This acts as a yellow. And then I add my green. So I've got my yellow and green. I've got the yellow and green up there. So now I've paid my green and I yielded a brown. Okay, can I keep going? Well, I've got a yellow and a brown here, and I don't know if you can see that really clearly. The lighting might be a little tough to make out, but that's a yellow and a brown on my step 2 card, and in fact it yields a gem. So I would put the brown back in, and I would take from the gem row the gem closest to me and add it to my stock, and that's never going to leave. That's mine until the end of the game, and it'll be worth a point. Okay, let's say, however, that I couldn't do the next step. So for example, let's just say that this card was in landscape, and I'm not sure I mentioned this in the manipulation actions, but one manipulation action you can take is to simply lean your card over, to tilt your card. Now keep in mind, as player 1, I can only tilt this card, and I can only manipulate this die or this die. As player 2, I can only tilt this card, and I can manipulate this die and this die, which means both players can manipulate the center die, but each one gets their starting die. Okay? Apologize for doing that a little out of order. But let's review. On your turn, you have 2 manipulation actions. You may manipulate the order of the gems in the row by swapping any 2, like that. You may manipulate your die by flipping it over to a new resource side, or the center die. You may rotate your card into landscape or portrait, but not your opponent's card. You may swap any cards in the card row, or alternatively, you may flip any card over from one side to the other. And those are all your manipulate actions. The process action we're sort of in the middle of, but we showed you how to walk through a whole process. If you can't walk through a whole process, so for example here, I've got a yellow and green makes a brown, I've got the yellow, I've got a green from my stock that I can add to it, so I've got a yellow and a green, and so that becomes a brown. But then here I need an orange and a brown to make the gem, and all I've got is a yellow and a brown, or I have a green also I could add from my stock, but I can't make this equation, so the brown comes to me, and I don't get to claim a gem, and my processing action is over, but I have secured this brown for myself, so that might come in handy at a later time, right? So I've got these resources available, and that might be helpful later. Now, so that's the processing action, and then the retooling action, as I mentioned, you literally take one of these cards, discard it, and put in a new one, keeping in mind you can only change your number 1 card. You can't change the other card. Only your opponent can do that. That's the whole game. So on your turn, you're either going to take two manipulation actions, or you're going to take 1 manipulation action and a processing action, or you're going to take 1 retooling action. Right? So either you're going to manipulate 2 things, or you're going to manipulate 1 thing and run your centrifuge to try and process, or you're going to rip out part of your centrifuge and replace it with the card that's sitting closest to you. That is the game. You play until all the gems have been claimed, at which point you add up and determine who is the winner. A couple of notes. One is that when a card has been ripped out, it is discarded entirely to the other side, so we'll just rip it out and discard it entirely. And if all of the cards, right, if we get to a situation where all of these cards have been bought, and we're down to 2 in here, and then we'll have a new pile over here, you'll now be able to purchase from this pile. So when you discard a card from the stack, you can choose, right? When you discard a card, right? When you do this replacement action, so let's say we had this. Sorry, we got to make sure that that's on the right side, and I apologize doing this one-handed because the other hand is on the camera. But let's imagine that this was our situation, okay? And I have decided to discard this one in favor of buying this new one. So this is going to be my new one. I'm going to put this up. But it's now my choice whether I'd like to discard this here or here, and whether I'd like to discard it on the two side facing up or on the one side facing up. So if you do go, in fact, through the whole card row, you can continue to swap new components of the centrifuge in and out by continuing to buy if you have not yet succeeded in processing all of the gems. Now, what's neat about this game is that, or what I think is neat about it anyway, is that you've got both players manipulating these three shared resources, these three shared kind of components of the centrifuge itself, as well as being able to manipulate how valuable the next process will be. So very often in this game what will happen is that one player will be able to successfully run through a process and produce a gem, and the other player will be really forced on his turn to then either tilt their card, right, so that that process doesn't work as well anymore, or replace the card entirely, rip out that card entirely to prevent the opponent from continuing to be able to build gems. And, you know, as you play, you see that, you know, this card, for example, has a yellow and a brown for a gem and an orange and a brown for a gem. So if you've been successfully processing on an orange and a brown for a gem, somewhere along the line you may have wanted to bank a yellow resource so that if your opponent does flip the card, thinking, that'll break your ability to process, you're still able to, from your stock, find that extra yellow. That'll make more sense as you play. But anyway, that is Centrifuge. I hope it's fun. It's a two-player game. I don't typically design those, but I really, you know, the way that these components came together and the way that the whole rotating of cards and orienting them and being able to have these standees create two sides really lent, me creativity and kind of ideas to take this in a two-player direction. I also really want to thank Anthony Amato and Nicole Klein, who are the makers of Resistor, which also has this cool double-sided card, and each player is using their side of the card concept. I played their game at Gen Con. I really enjoyed it. And I guess it was stuck in my head, so I want to acknowledge and thank them for making a great game and for being the inspiration for Centrifuge. So this is Isaac Shalev, Kind Fortress, kindfortress.com. I recently successfully funded a Kickstarter for a game called Chronosphere. You should check that out as well. Pre-orders are available. So you can find me again, kindfortress.com or at kindfortress on Twitter. And thank you again to Collapse Cards and to everybody who participated in this. I can't wait to see every other designer's ideas. I'm really excited. So thank you all, and you know, come check it out, and I hope you'll get a chance to play Centrifuge and tell me everything that's right and wrong with it. So thanks everybody.